Most people think building muscle is about eating more protein. Some believe it's about eating as much protein as possible. Others think you need supplements, shakes, or extreme diets. But here's the truth. Muscle growth is not just about protein quantity, it's about how protein works in the body, how it's absorbed, how it's distributed, and how it interacts with hormones, training, and recovery. And this is why many people eat high-protein diets and still struggle to gain muscle. In this video, you're going to understand how muscle growth actually works, which protein foods are most effective for building muscle, why some protein sources work better than others, and how to structure protein intake so it actually leads to muscle gain. And very important, later in this video, we'll break down the best protein foods one by one, explain when to eat them, and the common mistakes that cancel their benefits. So stay with me because once you understand how muscle growth really works, building muscle becomes far more predictable. Let's start with the foundation. Muscle does not grow simply because you eat protein. Muscle grows when the body receives a signal that muscle tissue is needed, and when the resources to build that tissue are available. That signal usually comes from resistance training. The resources come from nutrition. Protein is a key part of those resources, but not the only one. When you train, muscle fibers experience microscopic damage. This damage is not bad. It's the signal that tells the body to adapt. After training, the body repairs those fibers and, if conditions are right, builds them back slightly stronger and larger. This process is called muscle protein synthesis. Protein provides the amino acids needed to rebuild muscle tissue. But for muscle protein synthesis to occur efficiently, several conditions must be met. First, there must be enough total protein. Second, that protein must contain essential amino acids, especially leucine. Third, protein must be absorbed and utilized, not just consumed. Fourth, the body must be in an environment that allows growth. Adequate calories, good sleep, manageable stress, and proper training stimulus. If any of these are missing, muscle growth slows or stops. This is why simply adding protein often doesn't work. Now let's talk about protein quality. Not all protein foods are equal. Some proteins are complete, meaning they contain all essential amino acids in the right proportions. Others are incomplete and need to be combined with other foods. Animal-based proteins like meat, fish, eggs, and dairy are generally complete and highly bioavailable. Plant-based proteins can also support muscle growth, but they require more careful combination and often higher total intake. One of the most important amino acids for muscle growth is leucine. Leucine acts as a trigger for muscle protein synthesis. Without enough leucine, muscle-building signals are weaker, even if total protein intake is high. This is one reason why some protein sources are more effective than others for building muscle. Another critical concept is protein distribution. Many people eat most of their protein in one meal, usually dinner, and very little in the rest of the day. This limits muscle protein synthesis. Muscle protein synthesis is stimulated in response to protein intake, but it has a ceiling. Once that ceiling is reached, extra protein in that meal does not further increase muscle building. This means spreading protein intake across the day is more effective than eating it all at once. Now, let's talk about digestion. Protein must be digested and absorbed to be useful. Poor digestion reduces amino acid availability, even if intake looks good on paper. Low stomach acid, poor chewing, digestive inflammation, and eating protein in stressful states all reduce protein utilization. This is another reason people fail to gain muscle despite eating enough protein. Now let's address a common misconception. More protein is not always better. Extremely high protein intake without sufficient calories, carbohydrates, or fats can actually limit muscle growth. Protein is not used efficiently for building tissue when the body lacks energy. Muscle growth requires energy. Protein provides building blocks. Calories provide the energy to build. This is why people who undereat overall often struggle to gain muscle even with high protein intake. Now that you understand how muscle growth works at a basic level, we can talk about which protein foods actually support this process best. But before listing foods, there's one more important concept. Muscle growth is not linear. Beginners gain muscle faster. Advanced trainees gain muscle more slowly. Age, hormones, sleep quality, stress, and training history all affect results. This is why realistic expectations matter. Now, in the next part of this video, we'll break down the best protein foods for building muscle, explain why each one works, how much protein they provide, how they're absorbed, and how to use them correctly. We'll also talk about animal versus plant protein timing, how much protein you actually need, and the mistakes that stop muscle growth even with perfect diets. Because muscle growth is not about hype, it's about understanding biology and working with it. Now that you understand how muscle growth actually works, it's time to talk about the part most people care about the most: which protein foods really help you build muscle and how to use them correctly. Because eating protein is not enough. You need the right sources in the right amounts in the right moments. Let's start with the most effective protein foods for muscle growth. One of the best protein sources for building muscle is eggs. Eggs are considered one of the highest quality protein foods available. They contain all essential amino acids in the right proportions and are naturally rich in leucine, the amino acid that triggers muscle protein synthesis. Egg protein is highly digestible and efficiently absorbed. The yolk also provides healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals that support hormone production and overall recovery. Eating whole eggs, not just egg whites, supports muscle growth more effectively in most people. Another excellent protein source is lean meat, such as chicken breast, turkey, lean beef, or pork. Lean meats provide complete protein with a high leucine content and excellent bioavailability. Beef, in particular, also supplies iron, zinc, and vitamin B12, which support oxygen transport, testosterone production, and energy metabolism, all important for training performance and recovery. The key with meat is quality and portion size. You don't need excessive amounts. What matters is consistency and balance with other nutrients. Fish is another powerful protein source, especially fatty fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel. Fish provides high-quality protein and, in the case of fatty fish, omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3s improve muscle protein synthesis sensitivity, meaning your muscles respond better to protein intake. They also reduce inflammation and support recovery. Including fish a few times per week can significantly support muscle health, especially as you age. Dairy products are also highly effective for muscle growth. Foods like Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, skyr, milk, and cheese provide complete proteins. Dairy contains two key proteins, whey and casein. Whey is rapidly absorbed and strongly stimulates muscle protein synthesis. Casein digests more slowly, providing a steady release of amino acids over time. This makes dairy especially useful for muscle recovery and overnight muscle repair. For many people, dairy is one of the easiest ways to increase protein intake without large volumes of food. Now let's talk about plant-based protein foods. Plant proteins can absolutely support muscle growth, but they require more planning. Foods like lentils, chickpeas, beans, tofu, tempeh, quinoa, nuts, and seeds provide protein, fiber, and micronutrients. However, most plant proteins are lower in leucine and may lack one or more essential amino acids. This means that total protein intake may need to be slightly higher, combining protein sources becomes important, distribution across meals matters even more. For example, combining legumes with grains improves amino acid balance. Adding seeds or nuts increases calorie density and supports energy intake. Plant-based muscle gain is possible, but it requires intentional structure. Now let's talk about protein quantity. One of the most common questions is, how much protein do you actually need to build muscle? For most active adults, muscle growth is supported by approximately 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. This range allows enough amino acids to support muscle protein synthesis without unnecessary excess. Eating significantly less makes muscle gain harder. Eating far more does not automatically increase muscle growth. What matters just as much is how protein is distributed. Instead of eating most protein at dinner, it's far more effective to spread protein evenly across the day. This means including a meaningful protein dose at each meal. For most people, around 25 to 40 grams of protein per meal is enough to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. Now let's talk about timing. Protein timing is not magic, but it matters. Consuming protein after training supports muscle repair and growth. However, the total daily intake and distribution across meals are more important than exact timing down to the minute. What matters most is that protein intake is consistent and aligned with training and recovery. Now let's address calories. Muscle growth requires energy. If total calorie intake is too low, protein will be used for energy instead of tissue building. This is why people trying to stay very lean often struggle to gain muscle. A slight calorie surplus supports muscle gain. This does not mean overeating or gaining excessive fat. It means providing enough energy for growth. Now let's talk about sleep and recovery. Muscle does not grow during training, it grows during recovery. Sleep is when growth hormone is released, tissue repair occurs, and muscle protein synthesis is optimized. Poor sleep directly reduces muscle growth, even with perfect nutrition. Stress also matters. Chronic stress increases cortisol, which breaks down muscle tissue and interferes with recovery. No protein food can compensate for poor sleep and unmanaged stress. Now, let's address common mistakes that stop muscle growth. One major mistake is focusing only on protein and ignoring total calories. Another is eating most protein in one meal. Another is underestimating the importance of carbohydrates for training performance and recovery. Another is relying exclusively on supplements instead of whole foods. Protein powders can be useful, but they should complement food, not replace it. Another mistake is expecting linear progress. Muscle growth slows over time, especially after the beginner phase. This is normal. Now let's talk about how to build a muscle-supportive plate. A balanced muscle-building meal includes a high-quality protein source, a carbohydrate source for energy, healthy fats for hormones, fiber, and micronutrients from vegetables. This combination supports training performance, recovery, and long-term health. Now, let's talk about age. As people age, muscle protein synthesis becomes less responsive to protein. This is known as anabolic resistance. This means older adults often need slightly higher protein intake and higher quality protein sources to maintain muscle mass. This is why protein becomes even more important with age. Now let's address expectations. Muscle growth is slow. For most people, gaining a few pounds of muscle per year is a success. Anything promising dramatic muscle gain in weeks is misleading. But slow muscle gain is sustainable, healthy, and transformative over time. And this brings us to the most important point. Muscle is not just about appearance. Muscle improves insulin sensitivity. Muscle protects joints. Muscle supports metabolic health. Muscle improves quality of life as you age. Building muscle is one of the most powerful investments you can make in your long-term health. So, let's bring everything together. The best protein foods for building muscle are those that provide complete amino acid profiles, are well-absorbed, fit into your lifestyle, support overall nutrition. Eggs, meat, fish, dairy, and well-planned plant proteins all have a place. But protein alone is not enough. Muscle growth requires training, energy, sleep, and consistency. And once you understand how these pieces work together, building muscle stops being confusing and starts being predictable. That's the difference between chasing trends and building real strength.